In the 21st century, we have much more modern and efficacious techniques for testing drugs and for doing other medical research.
Oh, shut up. He's wet. I shouldn't sit back too far. He's pissed everywhere. You better shut up. Fucking sit still.
It's ridiculous to think that we're depending upon a research method, that is animal research, that might have been useful in the 1800s maybe when we were still elucidating how blood circulated. But in this day and age, we're looking at things on the molecular level and on the subatomic levels. And to think that we can do that in a mouse or a rat and then apply that to a human being is ridiculous. It just doesn't work. Major research facilities like City of Hope and Cedars-Sinai and UCLA are considered the center of medical research because of a massive public relations campaign and massive amounts of money that are pumped into these hospitals and medical centers by pharmaceutical companies and with research grants. It turns out that when a researcher applies for a grant, and all researchers apply for grants because that's the only way they can stay in their positions, when they apply for a grant from, say, the National Institute of Health, for instance, that money comes in. Half that money goes straight into the hospital. They can use that to pay the janitors, they can use that to pay the rent, they can use that money any way they want to. Then the other half goes to the researcher for actual animal research or non-animal research. But unfortunately, the National Institutes of Health and other research funding organizations tend to lean towards giving more money for animal research because it produces more data and they get more publications. And they're interested in protecting themselves in a legal arena by saying, well, you know, we tested this on rabbits and dogs and cows or anything else they want to test it on, and therefore we shouldn't be held responsible when it turns out to, lo and behold, produce heart attacks in human beings like that drug Vioxx did.
Let me explain something about the City of Hope. It's the golden temple of cancer research. I lost my mother to cancer, my mother's husband, whom I absolutely adored. I lost a lot of good friends to cancer. But what they're doing there, if I took anybody from the public into this facility and you saw what they were doing to these animals, because I was the lay public at one time when I first went into these research facilities. If you looked at it, there is no way in your mind you could justify that and call it science. It's not science, it's insanity.
Ruthless, I think, is the word.
When I interviewed Bill Maher for the TV show Celebrity Justice, I learned he was a free thinker who doesn't have any fear of making controversial remarks. So he takes on issues that other people in the media are afraid to take on. And he has taken on this issue of experimentation going on at Columbia University that he says is a perfect example of unnecessary and hideously cruel animal experimentation.
Some of these experiments are having to do with finding out, you know, how bad nicotine is for you. You know, like we need to do that.
I think beagles are a common choice for animal testing because beagles are generally friendly, they're a small breed, they don't take up a lot of room, and it's really unfortunate because if you think of all the breeds of dogs, who would rather be out running around in the sunshine and sniffing grass and trees and playing than a beagle?
We had bought some ads on K-Rock and, you know, 3 or 4 companies, pharmaceutical companies, had called them and said, these people are terrorists, you have to pull the ads. And they ended up pulling the ads for the show. I never really thought about the whole thing until I've gotten into it and realizing how important money is for everything, for advertisements. And obviously we can't show any of this stuff on TV, you know, because, you know, every other commercial is for fast food or for some kind of, for the meat industry or for some new, you know, anti-allergy pill or fucking Viagra or whatever.
I don't know yet of anyone who's died from PMS. I know some people have had PMS who've killed some people, but that's different. To me, that's a particularly weak case to be making for the torturing of little creatures.
I'm not an advocate of anything illegal. I can only, as a journalist, look at the social forces that might contribute to this kind of behavior. And I see that when the mainstream media refuses to show the images of what's going on inside laboratories and factory farms, it creates a social condition that could lead some people to extreme behavior.
score of 1 billion animals die so we can eat their dead bodies, so we can enjoy them jumping through hoops of fire and riding toy bicycles, so we can skin them and wear them, and because our palate is trained to crave their flesh, that all we need to do is be ever so polite and patient and just practice politics, and change will come when that's never happened in any other social justice movement, hands down, in the history of the world.
Throughout our history, there have always been those who have petitioned the government and wrote letters to legislators and politicians. There have even been those who have written bills and had discussions with the leaders of the nations. These tactics alone have never worked. The only time we have seen a social justice movement prevail has been because there was pressure from more radical factions. On the night of December 16, 1773, a group of people led by Samuel Adams and Paul Revere disguised themselves as Native Americans and boarded ships containing detained tea. They threw the tea into the harbor in protest against taxation. Adams and Revere were labeled terrorists by some and heroes by others. The suffragettes would chain themselves to railings, setting fire to the contents of mailboxes and smashing windows. The suffragettes evolved into the modern-day women's liberation movement, and is the reason women are now allowed to vote and no longer considered pieces of property. In the history of the world, what all of our social justice movements have in common is that they have faced government and community repression, including arrest, imprisonment, FBI and CIA investigations. They also share the commonality of having different factions within those movements. The most compelling example being the civil rights movement, wherein we had a leader advocating illegal activity in a peaceful manner, including nonviolent direct action and civil disobedience. But we also had another leader who advocated violence and absolute abolition at all costs. It was during this passionate time in our history that the President, John F. Kennedy, stated publicly, "Those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable." In 1960, Nelson Mandela led an organized guerrilla warfare against the white government in response to a group of peaceful demonstrators being massacred. In 1964, Mandela was convicted of sabotage and sentenced to life in prison. However, he was released in 1990. He was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1993. In 1994, Mandela was elected president of South Africa. A man once labeled a terrorist is now considered a freedom fighter.
I recognize that the things that I believe in very likely might take me away from being a father, from being with my son again, and I might have to go back to jail, I might be killed. But that is part of being a warrior.
If breaking the law and going to prison has to be a part of that process, then it's something you have to prepare for. As with all people fighting for a liberation struggle or for social change, you have to accept that it's part of that process, that is our job, that is our task.
I mean, Martin Luther King said all that, you know, that you got to expect it, you know. It's a sign of how effective you're becoming, you know.
Like the women's movement, like those who fought against slavery, what we've done is we've made this movement, this animal liberation ethic, now become a part of mainstream society, and that's impossible to imagine that could have happened without organisations like the Animal Liberation Front and others who use direct action.
And the system ain't going to sit back and let us do it, so they are going to demonise us. There's that saying, isn't there? First they'll ridicule you, then they'll attack you, and then only after that they'll accept you. We're the same people. This is the Animal Liberation Movement. We're about love and compassion. We've got an anger, we've got an edge. But you read about us now, and they want to, you know, they're starting to more and more and more and more, they're starting to call us terrorists.
You post on a website, or you say in a public lecture that you defend the Animal Liberation Front, that you support direct action, you are now considered to be an advocate and a voice for terrorism.
I've not done anything but have a goddamn website and a newsletter. Speech. I get 23 years in jail, possibly.
My girlfriend come back from Germany yesterday, They went to a fur demo, and on the way back they got pulled in and they were held under the Terrorism Act for 5 hours.
Let's applaud the FBI. Yay, cheer that. To cheer that is just like to spit and piss on the grave of Martin Luther King.
Throughout my years as an animal rights attorney, I've had the opportunity to meet several fabulous activists. I have met Kevin Jonas, who is the former president of SHAC, Stop Huntingdon Animal Cruelty. And I've actually represented SHAC on a few cases. I'm representing them now on a case. Kevin Jonas and other people are being federally indicted on charges coming out of the Animal Enterprise Protection Act. This is the first time anyone's been indicted under that federal act, claiming that these people are involved in a conspiracy. Recently, some FBI files were unsealed, and I was privy to them as an attorney, and read that I have been investigated by the FBI since 2001. Here is the affidavit, one of them, starting November 15, 2002, wiretapping. And this has everyone listed. I'm someone who is listed as a potential interceptor violator. Here's where they say that my toll records were reviewed on my telephone, that my trash has been searched since 2001. Here it says that I've been placed under physical surveillance several times in Los Angeles. It discusses that I have been seen with other people during non-Title III consensual recordings. This is the National Crime Information Center, stating that there's a warning that I'm a terrorist organization member, animal rights extremist, although no prior criminal history.